Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk with you about Vedic astrology, how it will impact your life over the coming week, and also how it will affect, at least in the immediate future, the election. We're going to talk a little bit today about the Democratic National Convention and also about the coming few weeks in the election and about topics around the world. So this piqued my curiosity because I saw somebody commenting. I know I didn't comment on the Republican convention to be truthful because that convention was basically determined months ago. The outcome of this election this convention was determined really a few weeks ago. So I think basically, and what I mean by that is essentially we have Kamala Harris is technically the nominee. Uh, Essentially they had an online vote because of deadlines um, for to appear on ballots. And so essentially they had legal reasons why they had to do it ahead of the convention. Um, the other thing is um, there is, at least now, a lot of enthusiasm about the Harris campaign. She's climbing up in the polls, although to be honest, it depends on which polls you're looking at. So if you look at certain sets of polls, he's leading. If you look at certain other sets of polls, Trump is leading. But there's no doubt that she's uh, raised expectations that she'll be the president. So, so essentially, we'll talk a little bit about that, then talk about the week in particular, and then we'll look at the individual star maps and focus on what's happening around the world, where the astrocartography lines are falling. So again, my name is Gary Gomes. You can reach me for readings or for instruction at 508-525-0001. Again, that's 508-525-0001. Okay, so that's the only way I can get the three zeros to line up. And my phone number is if I say them very slowly. And I'm sure you all appreciate it when I talk very, very slowly as well, at least for me. Okay, so I just have a habit of speaking quickly. And so let's look at the astrology map. Also, I will have some upcoming interviews with fellow astrologers. If you'd like to contact me about an interview or getting together on screen to share ideas, I've done that in the past. I'm more than willing to do that in the future. Please contact me. You can contact me through YouTube, or you can contact me through my phone number, 508-525-0001. All right, it worked that time. And you can also text me at that number. You can also contact me at Gary Gomes G. That's my name, plus the letter G at gmail.com. So I think this is going to be a really interesting week for the Democrats, and I'm going to draw up a map. I'm going to show you a map, the astrology map for the convention day, or the day the convention starts. And this is very inexact because These things tend to start around roughly around 8 or 9 at night. Um, that's an approximate time. I've looked and looked and looked online for the actual start time, and I haven't found it. That doesn't mean it's not up there. I just haven't found it. But I think more interestingly is we have a retrograde Saturn aspecting a retrograde Mercury, which is, again, it's not unusual. Mercury is within just outside of 1 degree away from the sun. So there's this thing in astrology, it's primarily used in Middle Eastern astrology, but Vedic astrology uses it too, called Kazimi. And that's when the a planet is within 1 degree of the sun. During this week, Mercury will back away from that. The 1 degree is happening roughly over this weekend. This is a Friday night. I'm broadcasting a little bit early, and so essentially by August 19th, the Cazimi will have gone. It will have disappeared. Now, Cazimis are particularly important because they make planets really, really strong and really, really bright. So I would say that Cazimi is probably the main reason that Kamala has shown such strength lately, because Mercury's the lord of her first house, is aspected by Saturn, and is in the same sign with Venus. These are both all what are called favorable positions. It's not aspected by Jupiter, which is the only flaw to it. And it's in the same sign with the sun. So the sun's in its own sign. Now, I did say several weeks ago, you see chinks in Kamala's armor starting to unfold around August 7th. And actually, that has become true. That has turned out to be true. She's come under a lot more discretion or criticism for failing to speak, for failing to grant interviews. It's been slowly coming up as more and more of an issue. I'm not saying it's something that will necessarily cause her to lose the election, but it's certainly a chink in her armor. And I think the fact that some folks are essentially praising what I would call very slight accomplishments. And again, you may disagree with me. That's fine. You don't have to agree with everything I say. But I think that this particular chart has some interesting facets to it. So I'll get into those in a second. But the starting date of the Democratic Convention is really the Saturn Moon conjunction is good for notoriety or popularity, for remembrance, but Rahu is in the second house. This will make it so. Just to conclude a previous thought, she is coming under increasing scrutiny for not talking or not engaging in one-on-one speech with, or one-on-one interviews, or unscripted interviews with people. The Mars Mercury aspect is in full play here. So again, there's a lot of media manipulation going on. We'll talk about that when we get back to the regular chart. But there's a lot of media manipulation going on in Mars, and Venus with Mercury will indicate a lot of I'm just trying to think of a good way to put it. A lot of love towards female candidates. Um, the Saturn aspect, or the Saturn conjunction with the moon and Mercury, Venus, and Sun, can grant power, but it can also, but there's an old expression in Vedic astrology: Saturn's glance destroys things. And I think one of the things that you'll see coming out of the convention, even though there may be a popularity boost or some kind of an increase, is that the Saturn aspect is going to be very telling for the Democrats this fall. Saturn is going to stay in the sign for the next few months. It's aspecting the two luminaries and the Lord of Kamala's rising sign and her fifth house of politics. So even though under good circumstances, this creates a Raj Yoga or a position of kingship, it can also destroy that in a heartbeat. Mars is also aspecting Mercury and Venus and the Sun, and that actually is not really a good position either. So you have two malefics aspecting the Lord of her first house. That can make her more competitive. I think, however, though, and I read this in other columns in order to be fair to other astrologers, so I don't want everything to come out of my mouth today as being something that I thought up. Essentially, I think the start of the convention, which will start off with Joe Biden, a speech from Joe Biden and his wife, will actually be a little bit of a downer and will set the tenor for the rest of the convention. As the week goes on, um, there will be mistakes in speeches made. I think you'll see a lot of enthusiasm. Essentially have to be pedaled back a bit. Now, this doesn't mean she's going to lose. Again, I have to be careful about this. This doesn't mean she won't be elected, but it does mean her chances will be compromised. They'll be more brought down to earth than they have been. Again, I understand it. This is a new candidate, but the electoral strategy seems to be um, minimal encounter with direct questions from the public, essentially the same speech over and over again, which we see from place to place, and almost verbatim, the same speech. And really, again, like I said, as I said last week, a candidacy really built on air. I'm not really criticizing her. I'm just saying there's not a lot of ideas. The the idea yesterday, I think it was yesterday, she the fight against inflation would be by uh, instituting price controls, which sounds like a great idea. Only the only experience the United States has had with that was in 1972 to 1973 when President Nixon imposed them, and they were let's put it this way, they weren't a success, to put it mildly, because um, price controls will work only to the extent that materials are available to merchants. And if merchants don't have materials, then the price control means they don't become available. So it can lead to shortages and things like that. So this is something to keep in mind when you're looking at these ideas. Um, do I agree that certain industries have been pulling in massive profits and taking advantage? Oh, absolutely. The pharmaceutical industry is a key example of that. Um, Higher education is a key example of that, I think, overall. But this that isn't what she was focused on. It was prices at the supermarket. And there was a graphic analysis done and prices, and there were huge profit margins in 2022, definitely. And that was the highest inflationary period. But the profit margin seems to be going back to historic levels now. So it seems like, and again, there was also the idea of no tax on tips, which had already been expressed by Trump. So there's not a lot of original thinking, it's just, you know, it's just let's be happy I'm not Trump, and let's be joyful that Joe Biden was convinced not to run, you know. So um, I think that this Saturn conjunction is really um, going to hurt the convention. One astrologer did note, and this is very true, the moon is in the same sign as it is in the birth chart of the United States. Um, the sun is not. Um, Jupiter and Mars are in exact conjunction, so that's probably what gave the Ukraine its military victories over the past few weeks, but we'll have to see how enduring those are. And and so we'll go on to those things. But this looks like, because of the Jupiter-Mars conjunction, the Democratic base will be very excited. It's not, I'm not criticizing them, they'll be very excited. But it will be, I won't say a setback, but it will be a time to sober up, especially with the Saturn Moon conjunction. Because that's one thing that Saturn has a way of doing, and that's bringing everybody back down to earth. That includes people on Trump's side and on the Democratic side. Okay, so let's see what happens with that. Let's see how correct I am or how wrong I am. And let's see now. So let's go on to the chart for today. So that's just, but again, I think there are going to be a lot of mistakes made at this convention. One thing I hadn't mentioned is there are 50,000 protesters. So we would look at K2 for that particular phenomenon, but those protesters aren't going to be well covered. There could be some violence at the convention. Mars is aspecting Mercury, is aspecting Venus, is aspecting the sun, and some anger and some violence aimed at the current government. So that's another strong possibility. Will it be very visible? My guess is it will not be. So this isn't like 1968 where the press hated Lyndon Johnson and wanted to do everything they wanted to embarrass him. And I think so. I don't think you'll see a lot of coverage of it, but there will be violence, I think, at the convention and connected with anti-war protesters, but they'll be hidden away here in this eighth house. But that'll be interesting to see how much coverage that actually does get. And again, we'll just see what happens. The day I would pick for anything to go wrong would be Wednesday. Okay, because it's Mercury's day. Mercury's retrograde. It's really low degree. It's very ineffective. So that lower degree. But it'll be very prominent, but it'll be very ineffective. And like I said, it's retrograde, so there will be mistakes in speech made. So let's go on to today's chart, which is Friday. Oh, and by the way, this is in Chicago. This convention's in Chicago, where the last major horror show happened for the Democrats. And again, as I've said in previous broadcasts, this echoes 1968 in so many ways. It's fascinating for me because we have um, a replacement candidate in Hubert Humphrey who was not um, who actually did face off against competitors in Chicago. Gene McCarthy was still in the race at that when the convention occurred, but Hubert Humphrey had the overwhelming number of delegates to get the nomination, and he was replacing a president who had decided to retire or not run for re-election. So again, there were anti-war demonstrations. Not as many as in 68. 2024 pales in comparison to 68, but they were student-run demonstrations. And there was general unhappiness with the state of the party in connection with Vietnam, although but again, there were similar divisions in regarding the Vietnam War and the conflict in the Middle East right now. And also, to be honest with you, the same kind of divisions that exist between Ukraine and Russia, in the body politic right now. I think the parallels are kind of interesting. In 1968, as a matter of fact, in 1968, and I wouldn't be really surprised to see this. There might be some kind of major foreign policy embarrassment to the sitting party, as happened in 1968 when Russia invaded Czechoslovakia. Uh, essentially right in the middle of the convention. So, can I say these things with certainty? No, I can't. But those are the historical parallels I'm looking at. For right now, we have Rahu in the first house, so there's a lot of confusion going on, or a lot of grandstanding or overplaying going on about in the world right now. Rahu's in Pisces. There's a lot of confidence because Jupiter and Mars are together. Mars will move into Gemini within about a week and a half. So we'll see a change of signs for Mars relatively shortly. And Mercury will move into Cancer, like I said, by roughly by Tuesday of next week. And Tuesday to Wednesday of next week. And you'll see a flip in how we feel about things. Less lying, um, less hiding of the truth. Let's put it that way. Saturn's aspecting the sun. So again, a lot of people will feel kind of frozen in place or kind of eager to maintain the status quo. Other people will be very anxious to get rid of it, but they'll be drowned out. And I can't think of another time in which the major parties seem to have such a disconnect from the concerns of the working person, the concerns of, the last time I can think of it was really 1968 and 1972. And that was mainly because of the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was mainly, it was a concern of college students who didn't want to be drafted. It was definitely a concern of the Black community who was being drafted in disproportionate numbers, and the poor community. But there was also a lot of what I would call um, disarray over cultural shifts. So at that time, this time it's LGBTQ, uh, and um, and other areas, other cultural shifts. And back then it was more shifts to a hippie culture, free love culture, um, those kinds of things. And also disrespect for the flag, disrespect for country, things like that. Right now, Mars is aspecting the moon is kind of a hidden aspect, but it's Mars is aspecting 8 signs away, so that will give some um, problems with laws, fights, and aggression over laws. And also, Mars is an aspect square to Sun, Venus, and Mercury, which really won't go away for about another week and a half. So that's sort of like a strong desire for change, but a change to something new or positive as opposed to something which is viewed as being negative or backward looking. That'll shift a little bit by the time Mars goes into Gemini, and Mars is not really welcome in Gemini, is somewhat welcome in Taurus, but it's definitely not welcome in Gemini. And it'll be interesting to see how that affects the charts of the country. And so we may have more open enemies around that time because Mars moves into the seventh house. Um, and maybe even a possibility. A friend of mine, who's also a well-known, who's also I want to say she's better known than I am, Joni Patry, had said Jupiter at 23 degrees of Taurus tends to trigger war. And while I don't have the statistical background to um, verify that, um, yeah, we're getting awfully close to warlike states, aren't we? So hopefully we'll dodge a bullet, no pun intended, with this one, but it is kind of a dangerous time, and especially uh, in about the next week or so. That's why I was saying that some kind of a major issue will happen, I think, next week. Um, the other thing is from the chart, K2 is still in the sign of Virgo, which is an earthquake sign. Moon is in Sagittarius, which is a sign connected with disruptions, but also recovery of wealth. So you'll see a lot of the stock market problems kind of die down a little bit. And Rahu over here is in a Jupiter sign. That combination is going to be interesting because Rahu gives a desire for advancement. Also, it'll be a desire for advancement or a desire for progress and an ambition. It'll also be interesting to see how the reaction among the money markets to price controls, to the proposed idea of price controls, because um, I'm not sure that'll be viewed so favorably there, but we'll see what happens. So I slipped back into the previous analysis. I apologize for that. So we have this Rahu and Pisces, not a good position. Saturn and Aquarius, still problematic for air issues. So those astronauts are still This, in this, I'm still stuck in space. They're still trying to figure out a way to get them down. But also there have been so many air disasters over the past year and a half, with Saturn and Aquarius. This is a kind of a difficult position. Saturn aspect in the sun's sign for the next week, not good for the government in general, not good for any government in general. Mars aspecting this sun, it'll make it tough for people to move or to get rid of people. But when Mars moves to Gemini, all bets are off. People may either resign or just say, I've had it, I'm leaving. Um, Other thing is, I've heard some people express worries about another epidemic, although it's certainly possible. I don't quite see that possibility being very strong until next April sometime. And even then, it won't be as quite as it won't be quite the same as COVID. It won't be as far reaching, it won't be as far stretching. Monkeypox has shown up as a new virus. And I think one of the things is that as you have more people moving from country to country, this isn't their fault, but basically as you have more people moving from country to country, there's more possibility of diseases spreading. So that's not that's there's a really good book, I can't remember the name, called Plagues and Peoples. And essentially it traces, I think it was William McNeill. And he traces the effects that major illnesses have had on civilization. It's fascinating to review that. But no, it doesn't look like that kind of like a paradigm shifting virus like COVID was, or even like the Spanish flu was surprisingly non-paradigm changing for a lot of people. I mean, it was surprising how um, it didn't seem to have a long-term effect um, on civilization, not to the same extent that COVID has. But COVID had, but there were parallels between COVID and what happened in the Spanish flu. There were protests about people being quarantined and having to wear masks and things like that back in the Spanish flu days. So some things never change. Um, so let's go on to the chart for the individual signs. But this, I would pay attention, especially on Wednesday through Friday. These are going to be kind of tense days. Okay. Um, the so Aries has Mars with Jupiter in the second house. They're finally out of planetary war. Jupiter won the planetary war, so we're a little bit happier, but we're also a little bit more realistic too. And Mars, so for Aries, that's good for money, good for financial optimism. Um, Housing is still in shortage, so I'm just going to say that, just sort of throw that out there to keep that in mind as you go through these things. Um, and it will be for a while, and that'll be a major inflation driver. So that's not going to be cured um, until construction starts resuming, but or starts increasing. And let me see now. Jupiter and Mars are in the second house. So it's good for Aries in terms of earning ability. Good for children of this sign. Some health issues come up. Moon is in the ninth house, some change of bosses or supervisors. And as we get to the 11th house, um, gains from work, but again, a lot of expenses, very expensive to live for Aries rising. Jupiter and Mars are in the first house for Taurus, rising or sun. And that's again May 15th to April to June 15th. So this is a bit different from a Western chart. Jupiter-Mars conjunction gives the Lord of the 11th house and the Lord of the 8th house, along with the Lord of the 7th house. So there'll be arguments about money or arguments about financial gains. Again, a little bit difficult for money because the Lord of the 12th house is in the first, and there will be concerns about financial partners or relationship partners spending too much money. The Lord of the first house is in the fourth. There'll be fights about that, arguments about money. Fifth house Lord is K2, or fifth house has K2 in it, excuse me. That's the South Node. Know what that means. Children may be a little bit deceptive or untrustworthy. Eighth house has Moon in it. That gives strong desires for freedom for the sign. Career-wise, so this sign will do very well, and financially, it will do well for a time. For Gemini, Gemini is June 15th to July 15th. Basically, at least from this chart, Mercury sits in the third house with strong desire for financial gain or improvement. K2 is in the third house, so a lot of disruption at home, a lot of dissatisfaction with work life or work progress, but there is slow progress being made. And at least this sign, although it will feel like it's going backwards, will actually show some financial gains this week. For relationship wise, there'll be new potential for partners or a change in perspective about partners, and maybe even getting into a bad short-term relationship. So just be a little bit careful, Gemini, so that you don't get so anxious for company that you make a bad choice. Let's see now. For Cancer, so but good for reputation, good for name and fame for Gemini. For Cancer, Cancer has Moon in the sixth house, so there will be a lot of attention on disease or illness. Financial gains, very impressive financial gains for this sign. K2's in the a lot of courage for this sign, a lot of ambition, a lot of competitiveness from the moon in the sixth. Saturn's in the eighth. As I've said, this sign is kind of reinventing itself this year. That'll continue to go on. Rahu is in the ninth house, and essentially with Rahu in the ninth house, that can give bosses who will promise a lot of dissatisfaction with progress. And Jupiter and Mars are in the 11th house, which is good for gains through property. For Leo, or through family, excuse me. For Leo, we have Sun and Venus and Mercury in the first house, so this sign will seem to shine or be very prominent. Saturn is aspecting the sign, so it will still see a lot of criticism and a lot of disappointment, just because Saturn tends to do that. K2's in the second house. K2 gives some problems with speech or some issues with being believed. Moon is in the fifth house. Moon is in Sagittarius in the fifth house, and its Lord is in the 10th house. So that actually gives some success in the realm of politics or in the realm of career luck for this particular sign. So Moon, so the fifth lord goes to the 10th house. So it gives gains in career through political areas. Saturn in the seventh, strong allies, but not necessarily um, effective allies. But I think the best thing for this sign to do is to persevere because Saturn expects you to work for everything you get. Rahu's in the eighth house. There are some hidden problems in this chart, maybe some hidden health issues or some hidden enemies or competitors. So just be aware of that. For Virgo, K2 sits in the first house. Again, this sign's very intuitive. Rahu's in the seventh. Temptation to get attracted to people you really can't, that are really a little bit difficult to deal with. The Lord of the first house is in the 12th house, so maybe a little bit higher level expenses than you're used to. That'll shift within about a month's time. And as a matter of fact, you'll see some financial gains within the next week or so. K2 in the first, so can make this sign a little careless, a little bit forgetful. Sun's in this sign. I've noticed that myself over the past couple of days. And let me just see now. Moon in the fourth house, some change in educational focus, maybe even a change in environment. Saturn's in the sixth house. It's good for some increased competitiveness. And Jupiter and Mars are in the ninth house. Change of direction in learning or change in direction of promoting oneself. So there's a lot of changes, educational changes going on for Virgo. And let's see, for Libra, Libra has no planets in the first house, but the Lord of the first is in the 11th house, which is good for financial improvement. Mercury will go from the 11th house into the 10th house. So this planet will become much more this sign will become much more social, much more communicative, and more agreeable to talking with people and going out to social areas. Moon is in the third house, strong desire for career growth. Saturn's in the fifth house, good luck, but only through hard work. Rahu's in the sixth, not a bad position. They have ability to overcome enemies. Ketu in the 12th, strong spiritual aspirations. And Jupiter and Mars in the eighth, strong desire to dig behind the scenes and find out what's happening. Okay. So this can indicate anything from investigative work to research to interest in the occult. It covers all those areas. For a Scorpio, Scorpio has Jupiter and Mars in the seventh house. Again, more arguments about who is right from this sign, and also about children. Children will seem to be a little bit difficult to deal with. Money, though, will improve, I think, at least from this chart. A lot of focus on work around the house and also around career life, a little bit of a conflict between the two. And again, Scorpio should not trust one's friends this month. Anybody with prominent planets in Scorpio, like Sun, rising sign, if you know it, moon sign, if you know it, in Vedic, anybody with that combination has to be really careful of their friends. Okay. So let's go on to Sagittarius. Sagittarius has moon in the first house. This is the Lord of the eighth, so there's a lot of interest in hidden matters, finding out what's going on behind the scenes. This is the United States chart. Saturn is in the third house. This is not a bad placement. It makes the sign more assertive, more conservatively oriented, but more technologically curious. And Rahu's in the fourth house. There is a desire to disrupt traditional society or traditional modes of learning. And Jupiter and Mars in the sixth house will present conflicts about that, increased competition in work. Sun, Mercury, and Venus are in the ninth house. That's gives the sign some increased authority and stamina. And Ketu in the 10th, a little bit of uncertainty as to what to do with itself in the world, or in the world, excuse me. So career-wise, there'll be some confusion about career. In the U.S.'s chart, it means some confusion about its place in the world. So that, you know, fits perfectly with what's going on right now. Capricorn has Saturn in the second, destroying desire for wealth. Rahu in the third, strong ambition, strong drive, maybe unrealistic drive. Jupiter and Mars are in the fifth, good for financial gains, good for, but also not good for speculation. Okay, so be careful about that one. For Mercury, Mercury is in the eighth house for this chart, for this sign, excuse me. Ketu's in the ninth, unusual turns of luck. So this is generally the planet, the sign connected with investors or businessmen. So this is why there's been this kind of ebb and flow in the markets over the past couple of weeks. Okay. And I'm not I'm not an investment expert. I'm just saying this is a general indication, not specific. And I am not giving you investment advice, I'm describing a situation. Saturn is very strong in this chart, very determined, but again, you'll see a lot of backtracking in Capricorn over the next few months. And I would say additional fallbacks or more conservative positions. Saturn's in Aquarius in the first house for this sign. Rahu's in the second house may make the sign a little bit unrealistic or self-delusional about money and family, and there will be fights in family about money. Sun, Venus, and Mercury are in the seventh house. That's actually not a bad position. It can give this sign a lot of romantic opportunities over the next couple of weeks. Ketu's in the eighth house. And at least from this combination, you can be attracted to people who are a little bit untruthful or a little bit narcissistic, difficult to deal with. And finally, Moon is in the 11th house for this sign. It's good for overall growth, acquiring new friends, especially female friends. But also just a little bit of a caution, they'll be a little bit fickle. For Pisces, Pisces has Rahu in the first house. Again, this has been a problem for Pisces over the past year or so. Rahu is very ambitious. It tends to take on a lot of different things. It tends to take on a lot of different tasks. So there'll be this feeling of unlimited opportunity for this sign. Jupiter and Mars are in the third house, so there'll tend to be an overflow of projects, and you'll try to do too much, I think, at once. For Venus, Sun, and Mercury in the sixth house, you'll have some opposition from government and also people in the arts and people in communications. K2 is in the seventh. You'll be attracted to unusual or odd or but also entertaining people. And Moon's in the 10th. Strong drive to change career this week, but Saturn's in the 12th. So you're also very aware of your financial responsibility. So let's go to the time and space chart. You know, so overall, it looks like an interesting week. We just had the sun change signs. We're going to have Mercury change signs, and within about a week and a half, we're going to have Mars change signs. Those are all pretty significant. Okay, so let's zoom out. Can't do it. Let's go back here. Let's do it. And more. Okay. Special. Oops. All right, so this is a bit easier to see. Still problems with disputes about land in Hawaii. I'm seeing from the chart. This is interesting because there'll be some kind of a government scandal about it over the next few months. This is also true to a lesser extent in Alaska. So maybe we're talking about uh, drilling rights or oil rights on the west coast of Canada or mineral or access to minerals on the west coast of northwest Canada. There's a moon sign running through California, Nevada, Idaho, Montana, and up into uh, west central Canada. This moon sign can give some water problems. Moon is in Sagittarius, but also some more fires. Um, yeah, Moon isn't a planet you normally connect with fires, but they have had some in California. And I think one of the reasons I'm putting it in that particular role is because basically the moon's in Sagittarius, which is a fiery sign, and also some more government scandals or issues in California, and all the way through Montana. We have a combination of Mercury, Sun, uh, going through Louisiana, Texas, Arkansas, up through Iowa, and to Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota. And that can indicate some lies coming from the government in or about those parts of the country. Okay. Also, the same thing happening in Mexico. And the reason I'm saying that is because of the Mars Mercury aspect that shows up so strongly in this chart. Um, there's a Sun Venus conjunction. I'm sorry, not a Sun, a Venus Saturn conjunction showing up in Ohio all the way down through Florida, and and all the way down through that can indicate some economic concerns. And finally, on the East Coast, we have this Venus. I'm sure that's a Jupiter-Mars combination. I told you I was getting flaky. That's a Jupiter-Mars combination. So that can indicate some legal issues coming up in this part of the world, all the way down through Cuba, all the way down through Panama, all the way down through Western South America, especially near Ecuador and Peru, and also some shifts in governmental structure in East Coast, even down through Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, New Jersey, and we know the senator's just been replaced in New Jersey, and all the way down through the Virgin Islands, and I'm sorry, the Bahamas, and all the way down to Panama. There is a Rahu line going through Guyana, Venezuela area, and Brazil. So again, there's some government scandal there and some shift in government and some weather concerns, especially around Sao Paulo and near the Amazon. As we go overseas, and this moon line hits Greenland as well. So I don't know whether or not that's going to be significant. There's a Mars. Will there be an earthquake up in Greenland? A Mars moon line up here? I don't know. There is a descending moon line going through Iceland and going through Germany all the way down into Egypt and Sudan and down next to next to Madagascar, excuse me. And that to me indicates changes of governments in Greece, excuse me. I need to go some more. Changes of government in places as diverse as Greece, Egypt, Sudan, and down to Madagascar. Um, there is this really interesting Sun-Mercury line happening in uh, the moon line happening in Great Britain. So as you may have seen in the news, there have been massive riots in Great Britain. I didn't mention it much this week, but just like it seems like violence is feeding on itself, and it's based in large part on pressure and misunderstandings um, because of of immigration. You can't you could say it was racism, but I think it's pressure because uh, of the intensity of the number of people that have been let into Great Britain over the past 10 years or so. And so um, it's it's a large cultural shift, and um, it'll put pressure on any country. I'm not saying there isn't an element of racism involved. Certainly there is, but I think that's an oversimplification, in my humble opinion. There's a Mars and Jupiter line running through Morocco and um, Algeria and down through the French possessions in, or what used to be the French possessions in um, Africa and also into Spain. So there's some potential for earthquakes, some potential for violence, some potential for um, opposing factions or even war in this part of the world. Saturn and Venus are in conjunction. So Germany and Belgium and Italy should be pretty active this coming week. And there's a Rahu line running through Turkey. So sadly, I think that may indicate some kind of a scandal or national um, problem for Turkey. This week and also Finland, although also all the way up to Eastern Europe and Poland and Finland. As we go over to Russia, there's a sun line going through Russia, and Ukraine is surrounded by our Rahu sun line. So, and again, I'm not engaged in wishful thinking about this. This is, I think you're going to see the Ukrainian victories as being very temporary things, just from this combination here. There is a Sun-Mercury line. There'll be a lot more news coming out of India over the next few weeks, maybe some political scandals. And also there's a lot of activity in near Laos, Cambodia, um, down to Malaysia, and down into Indonesia. So, and also through China. So it looks like a pretty disruptive period for these countries. Um, Maybe even some violence, maybe even some problems with food supplies. I forgot to mention the Sun Mercury lines going through Pakistan and Afghanistan. I'm keeping a close eye on that part of the world because that's potentially a very dangerous part of the world. Is potentially more dangerous than the Middle East, believe it or not. So that has to be watched very, very carefully. Jupiter and Mars going through this area right here, especially due to the engagement with China. It doesn't necessarily mean that China will invade or attack, excuse me, those particular countries, but there will be increasing strife in those areas. Excuse me. And finally, as we go towards the far east, the far east, there's a Rahu line going through China next to Taiwan, and I think down by the Philippines, Borneo, and Australia. So Australia, all these countries are going to be involved in some kind of a scandal or fraudulent activity. Um, and Moon is passing over Japan next to South Korea and North Korea, and so tensions may increase in that part of the world. And let's see now, New Zealand does have some activity this week. New Zealand has these Mars and Jupiter lines running through it. So this is going to be interesting in terms of, or not, or close to it. And so this tends to mean more government shutdowns or controls or even fighting in that part of the world. So again, I mean, one thing this week is good for if you've been putting off something like exercising regularly or um, putting off projects that you've been wanting to work on. The Mercury retrograde gives you a good opportunity to catch up on those things that you've left behind. Um, the Saturn retrograde, similar. Um, the um, Probably not a good time to buy new things or to good for bargains, but not for things like electronics or cars or things like that. And so I probably avoid buying things like that right now or engaging into new contracts. But other than that, especially for self-improvement, uh, an excellent week. Feeling better about yourself, feeling more disciplined. Excellent time to do that. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate everyone and everyone who watches. And please, if you like this content, please subscribe, share, like, comment. I got into a prolonged exchange last week, and it was it was good. It was very, very good. So, yeah, no, I like to hear from you. So essentially, uh, let's keep the dialogue going. And I love every one of you. Don't be worried about the future. Every new, every new thing, some adjustment, um, some courage to face. The world is never a changing place. So keep that in mind. Okay, so don't lose value of yourselves. Don't lose value of those who love you. And see, that's important. And focus on the things that matter. You know, um, A lot of this other stuff is really not that important in the long run. Okay. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves. I love you all again. Thank you very much for watching, and namaste. Have a great week. Enjoy the play. Okay.